Rejected media. We've talked about a lot of ideas that have been scrapped, and I guess I should just say cut on the cutting room floor. I mean, lots of things never make it to fruition. Maybe there's movies, games, scripts. The sky is the limit. Recently, we talked about Zack Snyder's little pitch for Wonder Woman 1854. That's the previous video in this playlist if you're interested. And today, we're actually talking about the Batman Arkham games, yet again, fan favorite on this channel, which is why I want to ask you right now, little question of the day. What is your favorite Batman Arkham game, and why is it Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, specifically for the 3DS? No, why is it whatever you choose? Interested to hear your thoughts down below, because there's a lot of debate around these games. But speaking of debate around these games, one debate has constantly been the use of villains in these games. T, you are back from the grave here today to record this video, not through the use of AI voice generation. Unfortunately, we have not gotten to that point where I can just cut you out of the channel, but
someday it'll happen though.
Yeah, you are unfortunately here in the present, and we're talking about the villains of Arkham. There's a lot of cut villains. We talked about Prometheus earlier, actually, in this playlist, and that one was really a bummer for us. But there's another one who actually made a couple of games, 3 out of 4 of the main games he appeared in, but he almost made it into the very first game, Arkham Asylum.
That's correct, and that is Mad Hatter. And I mean, he really had a strong presence, I would say. Arkham City, he had that side mission that, I mean, you're thinking you're getting the cure. It really was kind of that classic mind bend that they've been doing. I mean, they did it in Asylum when you thought you broke your game. They do it again here in Arkham City. He then shows up in Arkham Knight, and was he? I don't remember him in Origins.
He was in Origins,
was he
very
really?
Briefly in the clock tower, and
That's
you go into
right,
the whole,
he
you go into the
yes.
whole clock tower thing, and you actually meet Alice, and it's a bit of a very
Yes.
dark turn for Alice. But yeah, no, that was actually in Mad Hatter's storybook. That might be my favorite
That's
of the
a
three.
great mission.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. So I think, you know, looking at a character like this, I personally, without reading this and, you know, going back to this information from the past, I never would have guessed that they even floated the idea of him being in Arkham Asylum. There is a very brief reference to him as well in the Botanical Gardens, which is a riddle.
Just when you're in there, it's one of the scannable riddles where it's just a tea set that's kind of hidden underneath. I think it's when you first walk in, it's through a water, like a little water fountain area, and then it's kind of tucked in, and there's a little explosive wall there too. But so that's where that shows up. So you get like a little bit of a taste of Mad Hatter, and then he shows up later.
A taste of Mad Hatter is what he was trying to give Alice, and I'm glad that he did not succeed. Batman was luckily around. Very poor choice of words.
But yeah, so he then shows up. So then really the idea of him showing up in Asylum is kind of, it's just strange to think about, because I think that it's such a tight game. Like there's, it's just kind of bang on to the next person over and over again. So to think that there was something else that could have been added in there. Not to say that there wasn't room for it. We talked about there even being like a Batmobile that was floated in there at one of our other rejected media videos as well, where the Batmobile was talked about being in there too. But obviously just too small of a space. So
yeah. So this actually comes from a pretty old article back in 2011. There was an archived article in the description down below where we put our sources. You can check this out via the Internet Archive, actually, which is a wonderful little tool to preserve internet history. And this is coming from the wonderful legendary minds of Paul Crocker, the lead narrative designer at the time at Rocksteady Studios, and of course Paul Dini, who also is a fellow Paul, and they both, I didn't even notice that, they're pretty much just Logan Paulers. No, these two...
yeah, little Paul and Paul crime. Is what we got.
They had a lot of the hand in making Arkham City what it was.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you can see that in the Arkham games where Paul Dini especially was not around, that his influence especially was something that definitely shaped these games.
You missed it. Yeah.
Yeah. And when they were talking about this, they actually talked about some of the characters that they had wanted to put in Arkham Asylum. One of them was actually Mad Hatter, who did end up making it into Arkham City.
So yeah, Paul Dini went in and talked about this a little bit in an interview, and he went on to say that Mad Hatter we went back and forth about. We thought that Arkham Island, if it was an old family estate, should have a maze and hedges in an area for children, and whatever that had rotted into the present day would be where the Mad Hatter would be. To have sort of like an English garden party feel, and so we experimented with that, which is crazy. And to be honest, I pictured it immediately and thought this could fit maybe. Like this, especially once Poison Ivy's hit with the Titan and she just kind of takes over the island, that immediately is something where I feel like that could play with.
Part of me really wonders if one of the reasons this was ditched was the hallucinogen type of, you know, state of being that essentially Mad Hatter usually uses on his victims.
Yeah.
Especially in the Arkham universe, you know, it usually is involved around like drugging people, hitting them with some kind of toxin or gas or whatever. It's sort of like a diet version of what Scarecrow does to people.
I was going to say, is it almost repetitive at that point with Scarecrow?
That's what I'm wondering, because you were already encountering Scarecrow multiple times. And, you know, I've seen the idea floated of, and I've said it too, I kind of wish Scarecrow showed up a few more times in that game for how great his segments are. Love them. But I'm not sure we needed another character doing the same type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's worth noting that when you actually get to see this character in Arkham City, there's no Scarecrow physically present outside of some Easter eggs actually drugging you. There's also no Scarecrow physically present in Arkham Origins doing anything to you like that. And it's worth noting that when this character appears in Season of Infamy for Arkham Knight, you're not being drugged either. You're just dealing with the repercussions of people he had done that to before.
Right.
So notice how in every game that they did work him into, he was either using some kind of hallucinogen type thing or some kind of brainwashing or some kind of hypnosis, any of these things, right, to get his victims to play ball. Like having the tea party in Arkham City, having the mask on Batman where he's kind of turned him into the rabbit and Batman was going through the whole hallucination. But of course there was no Scarecrow there, right. So you didn't have to compete with that for time. And then of course as well, Origins, again, same thing. And then Night, they didn't even go that way. So I feel like they already maneuvered their way around that 3 different times in his inclusions, which is why to me, it kind of seems like they couldn't really figure out a good way to include this character without it being very similar to Scarecrow segments, even though they didn't specifically state that. I kind of think their actions in the rest of the main quadrilogy show that.
I agree. I think it seems like they were trying to balance it and make it so that it wasn't a repetitive gameplay experience and that you were getting a unique, I guess, interaction with every villain that you were running into. And so if you're dealing with Scarecrow and you've got the hallucinations and you're constantly dealing with that, and then you run into Mad Hatter and he's doing the same thing, it's like, well, okay, so like what's that? You just
Scarecrow again?
Reskinned him basically, and that's it. Like that doesn't do anything. So I get the kind of battle that they have to deal with there and try to make it feel like a unique experience for everybody, because that's one thing that this game I think does a really good job at, and really all the games. Like every single person that you interacted with was different for the most part. I think that like you look at Arkham Asylum, Poison Ivy's boss fight, quite a bit different than Bane's, which was quite a bit different than Killer Croc's and Scarecrow's world, and then Joker's big fight at the end. Like there's a lot of different variations just in that game alone. Get to Arkham City, you've got Mr. Freeze, there's a lot of variety in how they did that, and that's what made each interaction special. You kind of dilute that and ruin that by having it be the same, so you got to mix it up, and I think that's why maybe it became challenging to fit him into certain things.
Well, and as much as you and I still love Origins, because I adore Origins, this is one of my favorite stories in the entire Arkham universe, I will say that game already as a separate game gets criticism for this. How the Ra's al Ghul boss fight is basically retooled partially to the Deathstroke boss fight. They were using a lot of those same mechanics of, sure, okay, now we're going to have all the Races jump at you. Okay, well now we're going to have, basically, and then you have the Deathstroke slashing you rapidly 100 times. You have to block it every time. That's pretty much the same exact thing as when Ra's was doing it in his game. So basically when those mechanics came up again and they were already being somewhat reused to save time or because it fit a character in Origins, people complained. They were like, hey, why isn't this more unique? Like, these were always unique in the past. Why does this feel like I'm playing one phase of the Ra's al Ghul fight in the middle of the Deathstroke fight? What's the problem here? I personally love it. I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. But I do think that if you're already seeing the fandom and you're seeing those criticisms come from previous games onto the next game, how bad would that have been if it was in the same game?
Right.
I don't think that... I'm not sure people would have responded well to that.
Because these games are so adored, and because of that, they get hyper-criticized. So that's why you look at a game like Arkham Knight, which is a really good game.
Better than most superhero games, but still really criticized. Better than most
general video games. It's a really good game, and it's got a lot of awesome story elements, a lot of good things to it. But because of the expectations and what the other games did, there's a really high amount of criticism that goes towards it too, and just hyper-analyzing everything that it does. And that's what's going to come with this. So I think, to your point, Rocksteady understood that and was like, well, this is just an easy thing to nitpick. We should try to avoid letting this be a thing. How do we make this fluid? How do we make this not be repetitive? That Deathstroke boss fight, by the way, that the Mr. Freeze boss fight, I think, are my 2 favorite.
I love them. I love them. And even the Mr. Freeze boss fight in Origins, in Cold Cold Heart, which was kind of a riff off of the original Mr. Freeze boss fight from City, but different.
Yes.
Thought they did a really good job with. There's a lot of bad boss fights, or mediocre, I should say. There's a lot of great ones, too, in the series. It's just, but the great ones are amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I do think that this went on to set up what they wanted to do in the future as well, because Crocker, actually, when they were talking about Arkham City, you have to remember this was before City launched, went on to say that we take some of the cameos in the first game to actually finding or meeting that character. But they did take a look at characters like Mad Hatter and say, hey, we had a Riddle in here. Maybe we should have him.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think City is a really classic example of a video game looking at its predecessor and saying, how do we improve on almost every aspect of that in a sequel? And it looks like they did that, and I'm not really sure if they would have been able to do that if they started jamming in characters that maybe didn't fit the structure of the game because of what they had already done.
And that was one of the things that Arkham City got a little bit of criticism about. Actually, I remember when it first came out, was that there's so many villains in this game and there's so many interactions, like it's almost too much. So I think you really have to focus, which I disagree with. I thought it really
I mean,
well.
I think isn't that your favorite video game of all time?
It's my favorite video game of all time. Yeah, like it's the way that even the side missions, like I think that those were all fleshed out really well for the most part. And I think that it's my favorite game of all time, like you said. And I think with Mad Hatter's specifically, it was a quick, subtle thing where you knew you were going to see him again. Really, this was more so of just like, all right, you're going to interact with him. It's a side mission. You'll get a little bit more as we go along. But he's certainly a side character, I would say. He's not a main big guy villain, I'd say. He's definitely in the C tier, maybe B tier.
But he always causes enough problems to be memorable.
Yes.
In every single appearance he has.
Like even the DCAU. He's got some great episodes in the DCAU that are genuinely horrifying, but really good. Yes, but good. Very good episodes. So like he makes an impression. But that's something where I think where they had to figure out how to make that work in the game. And I thought they did a great job with City. I thought even in Season of Infamy, it worked well. It wasn't the most, I would say, thrilling side mission, especially even within Season of Infamy. I thought Ra's al Ghul's, I thought Mr. Freeze, even Killer Croc a little bit too was probably more interesting in my opinion.
You still got to get that bookend on him.
You did.
Instead of him just dropping off the face of the planet in the final game.
Right, exactly. So I think that was where I thought they did pretty well, honestly, with that in mind. So getting back to the original cut content, I think that it's a really cool idea. I could have seen it work, and honestly, that maybe there was a way, but looking back at it with this context, I think they did just fine with what they did, and I think it would have been too much.
And I also think that a little bit of this idea does play into the way it was done in Origins. It's a little more traveling around an area, actually, in that book, from page to page. So I think that they already kind of worked the basic premise of this back into the series later on at WB Montreal. I don't think it was needed. I just don't think it would have really added anything to this game.
I agree. I think like I see it, like I visualize it when I hear about it, but I don't really see like a way that it would flow well without it being like, oh, we didn't really need that.
No, I think the only reason that anyone would ever think I want that in the game is because it's their favorite series ever and they just want every last ounce of content out of it because they've replayed the game 100 times like we have.
Right.
But in terms of game design, I think they made the right call just as a video game, especially because at the time there was no guarantee that they would get a Arkham Asylum sequel.
Yes.
You know, they were taking it a game at a time.
And it's funny, as we look back at my last thing on this, is as we look back, I think on the videos that we've done so far, I think really Prometheus is the one where I feel like we feel like he should have been in there, and that's a missed opportunity.
Yep.
The Batmobile doesn't really make sense in Asylum, and Mad Hatter's okay being left out of here too. So I think that's kind of the conclusion. So
they got 1 out of 3 misses. It feels like the other 2 are pretty much hits.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. Yes.
So let us know anything in the comments down below. Did you enjoy the video? Did you not? What is your favorite? Actually, I don't care if you didn't. Just tell me you did. What is your favorite Arkham game? I'm interested to hear it down below. What's your favorite superhero game? Maybe you like a superhero franchise more than Arkham. It's blasphemy, but maybe you do. Let us know what that would be and why. Of course, it is Spider-Man 3 on the Nintendo DS. Very interested in your thoughts down there. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. We appreciate you very much. We do have a Fortnite code, DJAY123, which goes to help support this channel. Batman is in that game. If you're actually a Batman fan, you'll play it and you'll use our code specifically. The spirits told me, so you do have to do that. And of course, as well, we do have our own store, cosmobunny.shop, where you can get all kinds of wonderful, awesome, if you're a fan of comic books actually, coasters, keychains, resin pieces. We actually go to comic book, manga stores, secondhand bookstores, pawn shops, places like that. The back alley behind your house, you might have seen us. Be sure to wave. And we get comic books that are damaged, manga that are damaged, they can't be sold. And we actually transform these things into these coasters, keychains, trays, and more. These are wonderful pieces. Beautiful, the best I've ever seen. And my wife Jill actually makes very gorgeous handmade, handcrafted beaded jewelry over there. It's the best you've ever seen. Use discount code DJAY123. It's gonna be the best time you've ever had. I can't guarantee it, but you should support that stuff. We appreciate you very much. Have a fantastic day as always, and stay shway.